And good evening, and welcome to another segment of Abundant Retirement Podcast with me, Tony Roberts. And hopefully, we will bring a few thoughts and tidbits to you over the next few minutes that will help you with not only your retirement planning, but your just general overall financial planning, wherever you are in life, and maybe there'll be some nuggets that you can pull from that will definitely help you with that. As always, well, almost always, our boy Mr. Shore has been traveling quite a bit. We've had
Oh,
some formidable stand-ins. In fact, we almost thought we were going to have to go to the bullpen for a permanent relief person to
oh no.
to bring in for Mr. Shore, but he's back. He's behind the electric microphone there in his studio up in our Gradient headquarters up in Minneapolis. And Mr. Shore, as always, it is a pleasure to have you manning the controls and giving me the guidance that I need to get through the next 30 minutes of this podcast. So, how, how you doing, brother?
Well, I don't know. You're putting a lot of weight on my shoulders right there, Tony. I've been good. As you know, like you said, I've been traveling, and I just got back from talking to some financial advisors and some folks about finances out in New Orleans.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know if you've been to New Orleans, but
Oh, yeah. I've
I
been to
go
Nova.
once a year.
Yeah.
And I will tell you this, the thing about New Orleans, the food.
Oh, yeah.
It's the
But
best. It may
them-
be. I've in all my travels, and I've lived in Southern California, Nashville. I've traveled to all the different states, been to pretty much all of them. The best food I think I've ever had is New
Yeah,
Orleans,
yeah,
honestly.
them boys and girls no doubt down there know how to cook.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, the Louisiana spices are just to die for. There's a breakfast place called the Ruby Slipper,
yeah,
the original one down in the French Quarter there.
yeah.
If you don't get the eggs Cachon there, you're not living. You haven't lived. Every time I got to get those. That place is the best breakfast I've ever had
Hey,
by
I'll
far.
I'll tell you a quick story. I walked in. We were my wife and I were down there. Uh, in fact, I think it was a grading event. Gosh, 10, 15 years ago. But we
Yeah,
were
they
down
did one
there.
there about 12 years ago,
Yeah,
or
and
or
and
10,
it
10.
yeah, and it was the morning, and we were just out walking, and they were just opening up these shops and everything else like that. So we had been looking for a painting to go over our fireplace. So we walked by this. It was actually a jewelry store,
Uh-huh.
and she always calls me scout leader because she likes to dabble and look in every window of every store and make sure that they haven't changed the mannequin's position to be 1 degree off of what it was the last time she looked at it. So I usually go ahead of her, and this jewelry store had its doors wide open, and I just sort of wandered in, was looking around, and up on the wall, Tony, was this big, beautiful, I mean beautiful painting. It was just exquisite, and I made a comment about it. I just said, hey, that's a really, really beautiful painting. I just thought it was theirs. Well, next thing I know, man, they're taking it off the wall and bringing me around to the back to a viewing room so that I can get a better look at this nice, beautiful painting. Thank goodness Alita was walking in, about that time, and she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, they're showing me this painting for 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 possibly our fireplace." And she said, among other words, she just looked at me and said, "You're an idiot." And so I'm sitting there, and they're showing us all this, Tony. In my head, I'm like, oh man, here we go. 30, 35, 40 grand. That's least this thing's gonna run. So next thing I know, the person who painted this picture is deceased, which makes it go up in value anymore. And so finally, I asked the golden question. I said, "Look," I said, if we wanted to do something on this painting today, what would we be talking about?" And they said, "Well, the painter's deceased," and said, "This is a one of a kind, da da da, and all this." And I'm like, "Oh man, you are leading me down the pathway here."
Yeah, yeah.
And he finally looked at me, said, "If you want it today, we'll let it go for 175,000." You know what I said, Tony?
What'd you say?
I said, "Can I get two of them?" Lita grabbed me by the arm, says, "We'll think about it. We'll see you guys in a little bit. We're going to go eat breakfast right now."
Yeah.
She got me out there. She says, "You are not allowed. You are not allowed to go any more shops or stores by yourself.
Yeah.
You're banned. You're banned. You're permanently banned."
I'll tell you what, though, what I thought you were gonna say, they really do have they have one street, and I forget whether it's Royal or it's not Bourbon is the one with all the bars, and then they have one, a block or 2 past that runs parallel, I think it's Royal, where it's just all art galleries
Yeah.
and jewelry
Oh yeah.
galleries.
They
But the
trust me.
paintings
Yeah.
in some of
Y'all, no,
these
no, they've got
galleries
some
are
talent down there, man.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, phenomenal
Oh yeah.
artists.
No, they've got
Yeah,
some beautiful stuff down there.
yeah.
They got some real talent
And
down
some
there.
of it's
And
more reasonable than the,
yeah.
175.
No, I
They
didn't
led
see
you
it.
down the primrose path. They thought
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
had you.
Yeah. So I don't make any comments in jewelry stores anymore.
She doesn't. Yeah, in a jewelry store, they're taking the painting off the wall. I'm like, "Yeah, I would have run at that point." Like, "Nope. Nope." A
So
gallery's a little different.
anyway, as you can imagine, I had to delay my retirement planning when we were looking at that painting,
Oh,
because it was like
it
I
would've
could
yeah,
I
that could have made a
couldn't get
dent in your
I
retirement plan.
couldn't get the retirement plan to quite wrap itself around that
No, you gotta save that
175K.
money when you retire in 25 years.
Yeah, that's right. You got that right.
So we're talking about retirement and a retirement overview, basically. So when you say retirement overview, what are you talking about here?
Well, Tony, I get this question a lot because I think, there's an old saying out there that's sort of funny. How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time?
Right.
And I think when people think about retirement, it's just it overwhelms them to a certain degree. They
Yeah.
think about it as a massive undertaking, and they just don't know how to segment it out. So I ran across this the other day, and I said, you know what? I said this will be a nice thing to talk about on one of our podcasts, and I just think it's to me it's a lot of common sense, but it segments and breaks down the different things that you sort of need to think about going into retirement. It's actually a good barometer, so to speak, for even while you're working, getting ready for retirement.
Yeah.
But it breaks things down by segments, and I just thought our listeners out there today may benefit by some of this. It might spur on for them to sit there and say, hey, look, that makes sense. Maybe this is something I need to have a conversation with somebody about, whether it be us or somebody else. That'd be fine. But yeah, it's just again pretty common sense type areas, but if you don't sit there and maybe write it down or joggle the brain with it a little bit, it's things you might bypass. So, I just sort of put them into order, but if you want, I'll start off. But
Yeah.
number
What's the
one,
first one?
and I always sort of start with this, estimate what your lifestyle is going to cause you to need in retirement. Everybody who is out there working today lives a lifestyle. And that lifestyle, Tony, as we've talked about in many shows, is usually predicated on how much money you make. So, again, somebody that's used to living on $50,000 a year is probably going to have a much different lifestyle than someone who lives on $500,000 a year. But just because you retire doesn't mean that you want to give up that $50,000 lifestyle. It doesn't mean you want to give up that $500,000 lifestyle. So, again, you've sort of got to understand, okay, what are my fixed costs and what's my play money and how am I going to integrate all this when I retire and things like that. So again, if you live off of a budget, that's great. If you don't live off of a budget, maybe these are some things you need to start jotting down and getting a little better idea of what the costs are. But things such as housing, what's your mortgage, what's your rent, what's maintenance, what's property taxes, healthcare, what's it going to run in retirement or up to retirement? Because, Tony, as you well know, we have a number of clients who retire prior to age 65, and they need to cover their insurance costs, their health insurance costs. If their company that they previously worked for is not giving them some type of coverage or whatever, they've got to say, hey, look, what's my insurance going to cost until I get to age 65 and maybe can have the option of kicking the Medicare in. So insurance, premiums, out-of-pocket costs, your food, utilities, transportation, your travel, your hobbies, gifts that you buy at Christmas and birthdays and other occasions, charitable giving, Long-term care. I had a couple that I just had a Zoom cast with earlier today, and he's starting to have some memory issues, and they are very, very concerned about what long-term care expenses might be down the road. And unfortunately, we tried to get him some coverage a few years back. We weren't able to do so because of health at that point.
Yeah.
So again, uh, they've got amount of money that's coming in that they're both living off of right now. But if something happened to either one of them, and all of a sudden you've got six, seven, $8,000 a month going out the door to take care of the person who needs care, and Tony, you and I you mentioned a little bit about your dad earlier before we came on the show today. I mean, all of a sudden it's like, okay, where's that money going to come from? And if I still
Yeah.
got a spouse living at home, what what's she or he going to live off of? So again, long-term care, caregiving needs are very, very expensive. And then you've just got the old thing that a lot of people, it's the silent killer to a certain amount, but inflation. Inflation erodes our money 2, 3, 4% a year over year. And again, I go back to the rule of 72, but at 4% a year inflation, it means every 18 years our costs have doubled. So
Wow.
if I'm used to living on 50,000 in 18 years at 4% year over year inflation, I need 100,000 just to stay even. So again, know what your expenses are going to be in retirement. And then what do you do? Well, you got to calculate what's the income. You know, what am I bringing in? How much is Social Security going to be? When do I take Social Security? So there's a little bit of Social Security planning that has to go into it.
Yep.
Are you fortunate enough to be working for a company that still has a pension? You know, not near the amount of employees today have that option as they did back in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. But you know, if you do have a pension, what is it? How's it calculated? What's it going to do for you? Most people today are living off their 401ks, their 403bs, IRAs, and different things like that.
Yeah, they're
Uh,
employer-sponsored retirement
exactly
plans,
right.
like a
So
TSP or
yeah, yeah.
a 401k or 403b, or maybe they have IRAs. But this is something you help your clients with, right, Tony? I mean, that's really the trick of financial planning, and especially when it comes to retirement planning. Where is that money going to come from? And Social Security, that's the foundation, because almost everybody gets that, and it's a known quantity,
Mhm.
and so you know what you're going to get for the rest of your life. But you can also maximize it if you do it right.
Oh,
Correct?
exactly right. And,
Yeah.
and Tony, you just hit on a couple of things there. Probably probably where we start planning work with all of our clients, and I call it 1A and 1B. 1A is how much income are you living on currently? Because that is what I have to replace for you in retirement. So if you're living on $10,000 a month while you're working, my job is to find $10,000 a month immediately on the onset of retirement for you to begin to live on. And then to be able to increase that $10,000 per month year over year because of what we just talked about, inflation and ongoing costs that are going to be more in the future than they are today. The second thing is that once I solve for providing you the income you need, is to make sure it doesn't cause you to go broke.
Right.
So that sort of becomes 1A and 1B for everyone. Now, if we start to layer long-term care and tax planning and everything else on top of 1A and 1B, and it doesn't mess those up, for lack of a better words, then maybe we start having conversations about those things. But again, you know, where's your money coming from? Uh, your retirement plans at work, IRAs, pensions, Social Security. Maybe you inherited a sizable amount of money from a parent or grandparent or something of that nature. You know, do you have annuities? Do you like annuities? Do annuities make you think you're going to throw up and have green horns grow out of your head? I don't know, but it's my job to bring certain concepts, situations, and ideas and present them to you in a way that's understandable and cognizant for you to sit there and make a determination of saying, hey, look, is going down this path or this path or this path a prudent thing for me to do when I'm sitting here trying to plan out my budget and how I'm going to meet my budget when it comes to retirement, and where is the income going to come from, and how close can I make that to what I am accustomed to, so that I don't take a lifestyle hit.
Yeah.
That's very important.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's really good. So, we touched on retirement expenses. What's your expected income? Social Security.
Yeah.
What's next on the list?
Well, how to be efficient with your money. And part of that is, the big, getting a lot of traction today is Roth conversions, tax planning, Section 7702, and different things like that. Here's what our listeners should be concentrating on today, Tony. We are in a tax environment today that our tax rates across the country, income tax rates I'm talking about, are at all-time lows.
Hmm.
We have not seen tax rates this low in decades. And the likelihood of them staying this low are good for probably the next 4 years, depending on what goes on in 2028. They may
Yeah.
be good for the next 8 or 12 years. I don't know. But we're $37 trillion in debt. Likelihood is down the road sometime in the future, there's going to be a president or there's going to be a Congress in place that's going to say we need more tax revenue, and they're going to lift the tax rates. And so then you've got the quandary. Do I pay the tax today when I know the rates are low, or do I wait into the future and possibly have to pay tax on my qualified monies when the taxes could be higher? And to me, it just makes sense that if you know you've got a low tax rate, why wouldn't you pay the taxes now? And we've talked about this before. Would you rather pay tax on the seed or the harvest? I would rather, especially in a low tax environment, I would rather pay tax on the seed,
Well,
let
for
my
sure.
monies grow tax free, and be able to harvest those monies down the road, regardless of what the tax rates are, in a tax-free environment, which is very, very advantageous for people when they go through retirement planning. So,
Yeah.
again, these are things you got to look at. Uh, what's efficient about how to go about maybe doing those Roth conversions and different things like that. You don't want to throw yourself into a higher bracket because you're trying to do tax planning. You got your modified adjustment gross incomes down there, which can come into play with Medicare Part B and different things of that nature. But again, these are things that you should be having conversations with your specialist or with your advisor about how to make sure you're doing things as best way possible to make sure you don't take a lifestyle hit, make sure you pay the minimum amount of tax, and take care of other things that might be out there as far as expenses when it comes to retirement planning.
Well, yeah, you're going to have expenses, and I think it comes down to you have to have a strategy and a plan in place, and be working with a financial professional like yourself, especially when changes come around, like interest rates get lowered.
Yeah,
And there's positive and negative, as you said, and that just happened this week. The Fed finally, after a lot of pressure from
yeah,
Washington and a lot of
yeah,
speculation, and I think the markets have done well recently because they saw this coming, that the Fed was finally going to lower interest rates. Now they can get loans for
yeah,
things and hire more people with lower interest rates. Companies, it helps our companies. That's why it helps the stock market. But it can also help you if you're borrowing money, but it's not going to, it can be a negative if you're in retirement trying to save for retirement, or trying to get keep up with inflation with safe money options or safer money options, like a CD or a MIGA or something where your principal's protected. You want to be able to earn enough interest as much as you can, but still get some of that protection. And interest rates being lowered isn't going to help that. So you need to work with someone like yourself who can come up with that strategy. And you have to have a withdrawal strategy, right? You can't just start pulling money willy-nilly out of your 401k or the markets, right?
No, because again, it goes back to, okay, if I'm taking too much money out, if it's coming out of my traditional portfolio in my 401k or TSP, that's considered to be income. Again, so it could throw you into a higher tax bracket. You don't want that to happen. Um, what I found, Tony, with a lot of my clients, the nearer they get to retirement, the less risk that they sometimes want to take. So maybe they want to
Sure.
become a little more conservative. I call it green money, where it's more principal protected and things like that. So again, these are things you have to look at it. What's your equity exposure? How are you diversified? Again, Tony, when somebody else is in charge of paying you a paycheck, every Friday or every other Friday or whenever you get paid,
Hmm.
when somebody else is in charge of paying a paycheck, when somebody else is in charge of maybe paying for your health insurance, and somebody else is maybe doing a match on the money that you put into retirement and things of that nature right there, then you know what? If the market's going up, down, sideways, or whatever, you're sort of doing what we call dollar cost averaging. It's to your benefit. It's got just a lot of positives and
Because
everything
you're
else like that.
regularly putting money in
Yeah,
every couple of weeks, a couple of
yeah,
times a month in most cases,
exactly
automatically
right.
comes out your check, so you don't see it, and it's going in. So you're buying into the market. That's called dollar cost averaging, and that really is beneficial because then if the market goes down one day or some of those stocks happen to go down, you're buying when they're down.
Y-
If
And,
they're
and
if
you're
they're
buying
up,
you're buying
you're
bigger
still
chunks.
you're just buying, yeah, you're buying bigger chunks, you're buying fewer chunks, but you're buying into the market, and then that compounding interest, it is huge, right? I
Oh,
mean,
it's
but when you
tremendous.
retire, that stops.
Well, no, because when you retire, Tony, guess what? You're now in charge. You are your payroll company.
So you have to pay for those things. You
You
have
got
to
to pay
pay
you and
more
yeah,
for
for
medical
most of it.
costs
Now,
and
we
yeah.
do a lot with federal employees, and federal employees have got benefits
Oh,
that
that's true.
people in the private
Yeah,
sector out there don't. But
yeah,
again, and the biggest one is probably the health insurance component. But again, you know, you are in charge of your payroll company once you retire. So you're in charge of where the money's coming from. You're in charge of how much tax you got to pay on the money. You're in
yep,
charge of how much you're taking out where and when. And do you want to have your portfolio set up in such a way that if the market's down 20% and it's got to pay you out 5% for you to live on, how do you recover from that? I mean, those are things that you've got to be able to, to put together and safeguard yourself from and other things like that. So, yeah, these are the things that we assist and help our clients do and everything else like that.
right.
Another thing, Tony, out there, and I get this question a lot: should I pay off my house? You know, and I go back and forth with people on this. I don't concentrate so much in that area, and I'll tell you why. I'm a lifestyle person. So the way I look at it is this: if you're working and you're making $8,000, and I'm talking about what you're putting into your checking account. I'm not talking about your gross pay. I'm talking about what goes into your checking account, month in, weekend, however you get paid. Da 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 da. So if you're working and you're putting $8,000 a month into your checking account, and it's allowing you to pay your bills, pay your mortgage, pay for your food, pay your insurance, pay your taxes, go out to eat, do the hobbies you want to do, and everything else, then I'm assuming that if you retire and I'm able to help you still have that same $8,000 net per month coming in, then
Nice.
you can still pay your mortgage.
Yeah, yeah. Nobody wants to take a pay cut in retirement. A lot of people think
Correct.
I'm going to live on a lot less. In some cases, maybe you are able to do that. Most people will want to maintain their lifestyle and want to be able to do these things and live comfortably. So you need to work with, again, it comes down to bottom line, work with a professional to make that happen.
Yeah.
And these points we're going over are a great way to do that.
Yep.
Manage risk, withdrawal strategies, social security maximization, calculate your income, estimate expenses. What's another thing we need to look at?
Well, again, with those credit cards, the personal loans, the mortgage, and stuff like that,
Debt.
it's just again, if you're able to pay for that before you retire, and we can replace the same amount of net income after you retire, then you should be able to pay the mortgage. And again, the caveat to that is this: you may be sitting there with a 2.5 or 3% mortgage that you took out way back in the day when rates were low, and you may be making 7, 8, 9, 10, 12% on your portfolio. So does it really make sense to pay off 3% debt with 12% money? You know what I mean? Now, that's none of that's guaranteed, folks. So I'm not sitting here, whistling Dixie here and saying, yeah, you're talking about speculation and everything else like that.
Right.
But again, it's something to look at. Healthcare, insurance, tax planning, estate planning, just overall behavior, how you're going to deal with retirement that's different than what you've done for the past 30 or 40 years while you're working. All of these things go into trying to make sure you've got a sound retirement plan that allows you to do what's retirement supposed to allow you to do, which is be enjoyable. Go do the things you want to do that you've spent your entire life working toward in order to have that nest egg to be able to go on trips or spend time with family or buy the new car or the boat or whatever the heck it is you want to do. Just make sure that it's going to be as fun and pleasant as you want it to be, because life's still going to throw you some curveballs even though you retire. But at least maybe they're coming at you at 80 miles an hour, not 100 miles an hour.
Right. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Well, a lot of great stuff. We went over a lot today. And again, a retirement overview, you've got to estimate those expenses. You've got to calculate your income. Tony, you talked about Social Security maximization, withdrawal strategies, investment allocation, risk management. I know you have a risk analysis you have people take. Debt management, looking at, how much debt do you have? What do you need to pay off before retirement? What can you carry into retirement, or should you? Healthcare, that's a big one. That's going to be costly. People think, oh, Medicare, that's going to cover it, but it doesn't. There's still expenses.
Correct.
It covers some of it, but not all. Tax, estate, and we've done shows on each of these and can break them down more. But if our listeners want more information or have questions, or they want to get a plan in place, a comprehensive plan, so they can sleep well at night knowing, hey, I'm going to have enough money each month to live comfortably and last as long as I do in retirement. You want to get to that point. Or maybe you want a second opinion on where you're at if you're already retired. Or you might think you have a plan, but you've been doing it DIY or not so sure that, or all the things we talked about aren't part of your plan, or you aren't being helped with these things from your current advisor. They need to give you a call. How can our listeners do that to set up a no charge, no obligation consultation?
Yeah. And part of what we would be doing, Tony, is actually modeling this thing out for the next 5, 10, 15, 20, even 30 years. So again, once you see your numbers, then a lot of times you can make better decisions. So we're actually modeling this thing out. We're protecting against inflation. We're looking at the tax. We're looking at the health. We're looking at all of it. So yeah, being able to have a model put together that is your model. It's not a cookie cutter one that is used for everybody. It is your own personalized model that is going to be experiencing what's going on in your life and how your retirement wants to look. So yeah, you can come to our website, arobertsassociates.com. Again, arobertsassociates.com. Call us toll free at the office, 888-955-3665. Again, 888-955-3665. You can go email us at info@abundantretirementplanning.com. Again, info@abundantretirementplanning.com. And as Tony just said, first 2 meetings with me are complimentary. Meeting 1, we're trying to get to know each other, see if there's possible common ground where we can actually help you. If there is, then we're going to accumulate the data, put together these models from a 10,000-foot look in and say, hey, look, this is sort of how we see this thing looking. Does this make sense? Is it tracking in the way that you want it to track? And then after that second meeting, then the ball is sort of in the client's court to decide, hey, look, is Tony, is his firm, are these people that have my best interest at heart? Are they people that we can work with and go forward with? And then from there, we start putting the pieces together if we decide, hey, look, let's make this thing happen. So a lot of different ways to get in touch with us. Main thing, though, is to initiate that first call for that first meeting, which is not going to cost you a thing. May give you some peace of mind to say, hey, look, maybe the way I've got things structured or I'm doing it right now isn't the best way possible. And maybe a second set of eyes taking a look at it can help out with that somewhat.
Yeah, that's going to be very helpful. Well, I sure appreciate all the great information. And again, folks, pick up the phone, give Tony a call, 888-955-3665. Again, 888-955-3665. A great show today, Tony. Listeners and viewers, thanks for tuning in. That does it for today's episode of Abundant Retirement with Tony Roberts.
Thank you, Tony.